Now you remember I talked before about an experience I had in court many, many years ago. It was 40 years ago. And it was to do with non-dualism. And you have to realize that these are not just words, like non-dualism as a word doesn't mean anything, but as an encounter, as a reality, as an experience, it cannot be overestimated. But let's not worry about what we call it. Today I'm going to use this can to explain what I mean. There I was in a courtroom, and there was a moment there where the lawyers were reading reports out and the judge was saying things and everybody was saying things around me, and I was standing in the middle. And all of a sudden I started to say to myself, you know, even though what you're saying about me at some level is correct, it's all wrong because you don't know me. And the reason why I could say that was because I knew that who I really am was inside the can. You know, it's no good, they were describing the outside of the can. But the goodness, all that I truly am, was on the inside of the can. And that's really what I was that's what I was thinking about in the room on that day. And I remember wishing I could have a chance to be that which was in the can and not the description outside of it. And it was then that I had this most incredible experience of what was contained within me was suddenly there, suddenly next to me. Only it wasn't next to me, I was it. It was like as if who we really are is not physical at all. And there I was. And who I was just vastly, vastly, vastly different than the way they were describing me, and vastly different than anything I'd ever thought about myself. So what you could say is I was experiencing in those moments privately, nobody knew, I was experiencing what was in this can. They were describing what was out, what was the shell, and I was used to being that shell. But I was experiencing what the reality was on the inside. And then, as I've described before, I started to turn from the reality, from who I knew I was, and I'm looking now at the shell. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, I could just see that it was so contrived, like every single part of who I'd created, who I thought, the person who I thought walked in the court that day and who'd been running around the streets and getting into trouble everywhere else, that I could see that it was just all made up, you know. And so from the reality, I was looking at the shell and I could see that this was a completely contrived. And what happened that day, in effect, was this tin. It needed to be opened. In order for me to be me, I needed to get, my goodness was in there. It needed to come out the tin. So what happened on that day, just by that realization, is the tin was pierced. Okay? This shell that seemed to be impregnable, couldn't get rid of it, couldn't change my habits, couldn't change my ways, kept going around in circles, the same problems, the same issues, talking the same rubbish, dressed in the same stuff, couldn't move on, couldn't break out. It was in the can, but now it was stabbed. Something had broken through the shell. And this is the interesting thing, is once it was broken, it was never going to be repaired again. And so I go forward now, let's roll the story forward. And I'm in Grendon prison, and this is where I did my therapy. And I sensed an opportunity, got stuck in, did as much as I possibly could, but I still felt worried about the future. I still felt that I hadn't really gained enough of an answer to be confident to get out of prison and stay out, so that it really truly changed my ways. And what happened was, one day I was in a meeting with all the other members there, and I said to them, look, I've got a frustration here. And what I basically described was, I said, you know, let's imagine this is like a robot, you know, but it's a container. And what it was is I became very aware that who I truly was inside was trapped in a container. It was open a little bit because I was aware, just your very awareness that you are something other than what the world is seeing and experiencing you means that you've broken the seal somehow because the knowledge of who you are is seeping out. It's there, and I was aware of it. And I was saying to them, you know, I feel like who I truly am is trapped inside of this container. I called it a robot because it felt like it was sophisticated. It felt like it could answer for me, act for me. And one of the things I was so sick of was that I knew that every single aspect of this outer man, it was all made up. I'd made him up in my life. And so what happened on that day was that this prison, you could say, it's like a prison, like a robot, it opened even more. And I was becoming more aware. That week I used a psychodrama session and I opened up even more. I was so determined to be me. I didn't know why, I didn't know whether it was even possible. But in the end, I went so far that this can, you might say, this shell that I used to be, just completely broke open. And the contents of who I really am, who emerged, was so different than how I was before that it was bewildering. It was difficult to cope with it. I remember, you know, after our day, each day there, after we'd had something to eat in the early evening, you know, people could play snooker and they could watch the TV and do different things. And people would start to come to my cell, you know, which was sort of left open until it was about 9 o'clock. And say, aren't you watching TV, or aren't you going to have a game of cards? Do you want a game of table tennis? And I'd say, no, I'm all right actually. I'm just chilling out. And the other guys couldn't understand it, but they also knew there was something about me that had really shifted. There was something odd, you know, not badly odd, but they started, and it's really funny this, because they started to come to my cell instead of being out playing games and things. And sitting all along the bed and on the chair and on the floor, chatting with me about what was going on. It was really bizarre. I never asked for it. I wasn't looking for any attention. I was just experiencing the reality of what had been locked up inside this tin. And this is another thing that happened with all this, was that there was a supreme confidence. You know, I was due to be released, and there was absolutely no worry, no sense of failure that's going to happen here. Nothing. Everything's going to be just fine. And so we might say, like I said early on, using the word non-dualism, which is something you can look up and check out, words like that don't mean anything. But when we find out what they're pointing to, like what I'm pointing to, how many people do you meet who are locked up inside of a definition? And the definition is just mental. It's a mental definition. It's not real. This is why it can be kind of annoying when you hear people saying, oh yeah, well, you're just locked up in an idea. You know, you just got an idea about yourself and you think that's who you are. But that's almost like a dream. It's like a dream at night. But underneath all that is something more true. And then, of course, I had another experience just down, not far from where I'm standing now, in a lane. And that's the day when I was going down the lane, you know, living my life sort of thing. And again, I'd been sort of aware that these old ways, this sort of fear and things that might get at me were trying to form themselves again. And all of a sudden, I walked out of the mind, just gone, left it behind. And the only way I can describe it is that this was gone. It was like as if it was thrown across a field, you know, dumped in a bin. And I was just entirely who I truly am. And who I am in its entirety is actually just completely eternal. And when you are in that place, that's what they call singularity. It's not two things. There is no other thing. And everything is contained within your reality, in that reality. You are part of that reality. And your personality that you thought was who you were was no more than just things stuck on, like badges, you know, like little badges stuck upon you, but they're meaningless because it was always that which is underneath, which is eternal, which we're all looking for. But the outer man, and this is something that we struggle with. You see, we all want what is actually inside the can. We all want the reality. We want to be that. But it's the can itself that's terrified of losing its control, of losing its identity. I remember some years ago, after I wrote my second book, and people asked me, what does it feel like to do what you've done, And the only way I could describe it is like I used to go around in a Batman suit, or a Spider-Man suit, or a set of overalls. And what it's like is, it's just like one day you realize how stupid it all is, how what you are on the inside, and the outside just starts to fall away. And it's like as if the overalls, dirty old stupid overalls that weren't even true, just fall on the floor. And I'm free. It's a very difficult subject to convey, but that's about the best way I can do today.